In the kingdom of Edenbell, all inhabitants are incredibly proud of their flower, sun, and light. The people openly bestow such titles upon the blonde, 5th Princess Marianne, enchanting everyone who sees her with her beauty. She seemed to be the absolute ideal in all her features. A radiant smile, a sweet voice, golden, honey-colored eyes, exquisite appearance, obedience, and the kindness of her character. The universal favorite, adored by everyone, associated with a soft, sunny, not scorching day in a cozy park. But in the royal family, there was her opposite, comparable to a dark, gloomy forest. A girl with hair the color of a raven's wing and murky, dim eyes created an entirely different impression. However, despite all their differences, her sister, like everyone else, treasured the blonde beauty. After all, they were one family. Everyone who saw the sisters together would whisper behind their backs, quietly asking each other how such a gloomy raven could cling to Marianne. Compared to the son of Edenbell, no one considered her a princess, or wished to treat her like nobility. Everyone considered it their duty to compare her to Marianne at every convenient opportunity and humiliate the raven, as they called the gloomy girl. However, this did not matter much, as long as Marianne herself loved her sister and spent time with her with equal initiative. When communicating with her, even after the servant's slander behind her back, one could not be sad or say that something was wrong. A smile always had to adorn her already sweet little face. The sister, of course, absolutely sincerely loved Marianne and cared for her, once a long time ago. Before the poisoning incident, the blame for which was placed precisely on her. On one of those beautiful, sunny, warm spring days, the sister invited Marianne to admire the blossoming, fragrant flowers together, so as not to admire such luxurious beauty alone. It seemed like a perfect idea to combine a wonderful time with a cup of delicious tea recently gifted to the girl, until suddenly, Marianne's cup tipped over, and drops of blood spread across the white tablecloth. Time seemed to stop. The blonde, delicate princess coughed up crimson blood, staining her dress and hands, and fearfully looking around, slowly raising her eyes to her sister as the scarlet stream dripped from her tiny chin. Before she could do anything, Marianne collapsed from the chair unconscious. Her sister could only scream in fear, trying to attract attention and call for help for her beloved sister. Now everyone looked at her with even greater contempt and openly whispered, absolutely no one could think that the raven was capable of such a thing. Some believed that she had always been jealous, which was why she was so gloomy, even with Marianne herself. Others openly said that she was the shame of the empire, since even the fact that they were, albeit half, sisters, did not stop her from such a terrible act. The girl herself, after a long time, finally opened her eyes and rose from the cold floor, rubbing her forehead in an attempt to remember recent events. Iron shackles burned coldly on her wrists. Seconds stretched like hours in this damn, dark, and freezing dungeon. She had no strength from hunger. It seemed there was no way out. Not a single ray of light penetrated. What saved her was that after a few minutes, her eyes finally adjusted to the darkness, and the girl could see a tray of food on the floor of her cell, if you could call a small piece of bread and a glass of water such. Nothing remained but to exhaust herself with meaningless survival in complete darkness, gradually going mad from loneliness. Not a single family member visited her in the dungeon. The princess had already despaired of meeting her end here, but a drop of hope that the false accusation would be lifted and she would return to her usual life warmed her soul. But comforting herself with faith in the better, the girl often wondered about her sister. On one of these same burdensome days, her eyes saw light again. The door was opened by 2 guards who told her to leave the cell. She walked barefoot along the street, past columns, while being led by the chain of her shackles. However, this was not even the main thing for the princess at that moment. Finally, sunlight warmed her skin. Finally, she saw her familiar, rich garden with a fountain and felt the aroma of flowers. But her thoughts were interrupted by the guard's rough grunt and then a strong grip on her shoulder. Opening the door to the throne room, he threw her to the floor. When the girl opened her eyes, she saw her entire royal family before her. The princess was overjoyed to finally see them, but fearfully searched for Marianne with her eyes. The latter leisurely emerged from the right side of the royal throne, giving her sister enormous relief, until her father harshly pronounced her name, announcing the sentence for the attempt to kill Marie, death. Alice stood on her knees in tears and looked at her sister in fear, seeking support, but found only a sinister smile and cold gaze of red eyes. The Edenbell royal family was not small. First Prince Lachius, second Prince Elsis, third Princess Adriana, 5th Princess Marianne, 6th Prince Relis, and the Emperor himself, Jules. Absolutely everyone looked at the 4th princess, guilty of attempting to kill her sister, Princess Alice, expecting her confession. She seemed unable to believe what she heard, maintaining silence, which her father emphasized by continuing to pressure his daughter. Her previously empty eyes filled with tears, and she began to tremble, unable to utter a word. Adriana stood before her, hysterically pointing at her and calling her to account, calling her a murderer. The new title echoed in her head. Alice could only ask her sister back, desperately losing hope in the belief of even one family member. Even her younger brother Relis looked at her with disgust, forcing her to admit guilt. Alice begged them to believe her, but the 6th prince, clenching his fists, shouted that he did not want to hear her excuses. Interrupting her, an order to bring a witness rang through the throne room. The doors burst open, and a servant hurriedly entered, introducing herself as Rebecca, working in Alice's palace, who fearfully said she had seen everything. A beautiful day, a spring garden, Marianne and Alice having tea in the courtyard, and the white powder, similar to sugar, which the 4th princess sprinkled into Marie's cup. The girl was unable to even object, seeming not to hear the words from shock and the realization of deep betrayal. Everyone looked down on her with disgust and hatred, Marianne with fear. Jules brought his daughter back to reality, pulling out a small bottle with powder at the bottom, which turned out to be the poison. When the Emperor threw the bottle at her feet, Alice looked at the completely unfamiliar object with shock. Finally managing to squeeze out a sound, she clutched the fabric of her dress and desperately began to swear that she would never even have thought of killing her sister, but her voice broke with sobs. She began to crawl on her knees to the figure who had been silent from the start, her last hope, Brother Lachius, whose clothing hem she grabbed, begging him to believe her, meeting his gaze. Without taking his eyes off her, he knelt before her, carefully taking her chin. The girl's eyes shone with gratitude until the sound of a slap rang through the hall. All her tears instantly flew from her eyes from such a powerful slap that left a large red mark. Tears of not pain, but of hurt, flowed with new strength. Immediately after, Alice was grabbed by the face again, forced to look at Lachius, who decided to show his disgust both verbally and physically with dirty words. A mad look, full of hatred, accompanied terrible words, a request to his father for the death penalty. The world stopped existing for the girl with that word. The entire environment was like in a fog, and the last phrase in her thoughts repeated louder and louder, making her head crack and swell with excitement and nerves. Even Mari looked at her with dislike, and after Alice's appeal to her through the pain, the 5th princess only burst into tears from fear. The sentence was announced. Execution in 4 days. All this time, instead of food, she would be served stagnant water. But this was far from the most offensive thing compared to the disbelief and betrayal of her own family. On the Judgment Day, she was brought to a table where her entire family sat, except for Marianne. It would have been too terrible a sight for such a delicate creature. Sharp guillotines, heated coals, blazing with heat, and Alice, with a smile of acceptance on her knees before everyone, the star of the show, watching the red-hot needle approaching her eye. A piercing scream rang out. Despite the hellish pain, to everyone's spite, Alice did not close her eyes until the very end. She did not want to bring pleasure to those who did not even deign to listen to her, let alone believe her. Alice mentally called to the goddess of the empire, of the moon and revenge, Selene, begging for the opportunity to take revenge on everyone who did not believe her, or to prevent her from being reborn as a human, to avoid attempts to seek justice, to not have the feelings and emotions experienced in the last days of her life, to not rise in order to fall, never. Sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating a pregnant woman in a chair, next to whom a boy sat. He constantly talked to his mother's belly, asking the child to appear earlier, and his mother gently stroked his head, assuring him that his wish would definitely come true in a few months. Though he suffered from impatience, he gently caressed his mother's belly, from which would soon emerge the one who would passionately take revenge. The new vessel of Alice, and loved by all, servants, courtiers, parents, and especially Elsis, his younger sister. A blue-eyed and blonde baby was born, who cursed God in her thoughts, because she was born human again, despite her pleas never to be human again. Everyone called the newborn a charming beauty, of course, because she was Princess Aisha, the first of the Elmir clan, at war with Edenbell. Though she had a displeased little face, she was loved, especially by her older brother, the heir to the throne. He, like no one else, admired her beauty, though she was truly amazing. soft and white as cloud's hair and sapphire eyes, but the attention to her was too great for a child not even a year old. How different this was from her treatment in Edenbell. Elsis brought her the most beautiful and delicate flower, symbolizing the Elmir Empire, and gently attached it to her little ear, tucking it into her silvery hair strands. He constantly cared for her and admired her cuteness, which was extremely unusual and therefore irritating for Aisha. But this did not offend the prince. He considered her shy and the servants too young. But the brother wanted to ease the tension, so he tried to interest Aisha. Slyly squinting his eyes, he tilted his head and decided to share a secret. He had long dreamed of a little sister, but his birth mother often was ill, and pregnancy would have been risky. She died 2 years before Aisha's birth, and something pricked the little princess's heart. Despite all the pain, Empress Iris became native to him, as was her daughter, the princess, whom he sincerely loved, thanks to whom he was happy, and whom he warmly thanked for her appearance. The girl's heart melted at his words, but the touching scene was interrupted by the opening door, through which Empress Iris entered, surprised that Elsis had come first again. This extremely touched her, as well as Tyrion of Elmir. The emperor himself, who conquered neighboring countries, paved the path of the empire's glory, known for justice, diplomacy, excellent governance, and the people's love for him. Sharing gold coins with the people, making offerings to the gods, distributing bread and salt, pardoning prisoners, the pride of the empire and Aisha's new father, cold to everyone outside the palace, but inside, kind-hearted, affectionate, soft, and passionately loving. A caring father, loving mother and brother, long awaiting his sister, a true and strong family, an idyll that made Alice painfully drown in her own memories. In the last days of the 4th princess of Edenbell's existence, Marianne came to visit her, greatly surprising her. At first, Mari fearfully and sympathetically addressed her sister, but then her shoulders began to tremble, and she herself burst into laughter, causing Alice to fall into a stupor. The 5th princess laughed at her sister's misery, reminding her of events from 3 years ago, how she, the daughter of a maid picked up from the street, was accepted into the imperial family due to her beauty and golden eyes. Then 10-year-old Marianne looked pitiful, just like Alice now. The 5th princess acknowledged her sister's kindness, bending nearby, and noted the injustice of fate. To the question that gave Alice a blazing, bright hope, whether she wanted to get out, she found the strength to answer that it was almost her main desire. But the light in her eyes went out with the loudly slammed grate, the sound of which made her flinch. This would never happen, and Alice, deep down, knew this even without Mary's mockery, who was, of course, loved much more, and whose eyes in the shadow shone blood red. Laughing and shaking the dust of the prison from her dress, Mari said goodbye, once again reminding about the execution, and left, calling her a sister one last time with a feigned, pitiful smirk. But the traitor was far from just the 5th princess. The half-brother, mother, father, relatives with whom Alice shared childhood, all turned away, all abandoned, all did not believe, did not listen, did not look at her. How Aisha was now loved by the Elmir family, killed and tore Alice's heart to pieces. She did not feel safe from this care. The girl remembered her past relatives, and in torment tried not to see the last moments of that life, not to feel the pain that was so undeservedly caused to her. When would this scene turn into another betrayal? Aisha firmly decided not to love anyone, and not to allow anyone to see her feelings. It would be easier for her and all the people close to her. This was for their own good. Even if from their sincere love now everything falls into place, peace comes, and Alice no longer hurts as much as she did in that life. Every day the servants dressed Aisha and admired her beauty, praising her, calling her an angel. However, they also worried that she remained silent. Everyone loved her for her kindness, beauty, and gentleness, but this did not stop the servants from discussing that something was not right. Nothing prevented the princess from doing so, but something stopped her, made her afraid. Although she was not completely without communication, from birth, Aisha had the gift of seeing light spirits with whom she communicated mentally and who supported and comforted her. Such people are called sorcerers. While the skill of seeing spirits was materially useless for a person who does not wish to live, it could not be called unnecessary, considering they could help. They asked if she could speak, to which they received a positive answer, but Alisa, remembering that in her previous life her words led to nothing, was greatly afraid, or saw no point. What if everything would be in vain again, and no one would believe a single phrase she uttered? But her mother, Eris, always supported her daughter. Perhaps she was worried too, but was prepared to wait as long as necessary. Never revealing her anxiety, the Empress looked at Aisha with a warm smile and maternal love and care, always embarrassing her shy daughter. Tyrion approached the ladies, reminding them of the momentous day, Aisha's first birthday. The Emperor enticed the princess by telling her that she still did not know what gifts her parents would provide, and she remembered her brother's gift, a bear he had caught at 12 years old. The masculine Tyrion, standing in the doorway before his wife, extended his hand to the little one and gently ruffled her soft hair, noting how she had grown. When Aerys laughed a little and suggested the father take the daughter in his arms, he was taken aback, blushing but still extended slightly trembling hands. However, he immediately withdrew, clarifying that due to the girl's size and build, he was afraid of harming her. Indeed, she was smaller than other children, but far from as fragile as she seemed. Aerys reminded the Emperor that Aisha was their daughter, and with each passing day she was growing bigger and healthier, so there was nothing to fear. Tyrion, calming down, gently and carefully took the child in his arms, slightly lifting her before him and reminding her how much he loved her. The girl felt awkward, being in her father's arms for the first time, but sat calmly. Suddenly Tyrion decided to announce that in honor of the princess, he was organizing a banquet to celebrate. Perhaps the news that the little one was healthy would delight the people. At the Empress's hesitation about Aisha's shyness and a question about the event's duration, the man without hesitation announced a month, throwing both his daughter and wife into shock. The anxious mother did not believe him and began to ask about expenses, but the Emperor was absolutely serious, and Isis only supported his idea of organizing a grand event for Aisha. The girl herself was in shock at such an initiative and was sure that Aerys would not agree. However, she was instead delighted about hosting such a celebration. Though the people respected the imperial family, the Empress's position was not yet solidified compared to the previous one who had an impeccable lineage. Her people still served at the imperial palace. The status of a family member who would not inherit the throne was determined by foreign powers, so Aerys was very worried about Aisha. She must have been happy about the opportunity to strengthen the princess's influence, a grand banquet for the Emperor's beloved daughter. The little girl only sighed heavily. Tyrion discussed the guest list with his wife, and even suggested she invite her relatives, which made her beam. The Emperor promised to send an ambassador to the northern borders of the empire, where the family of Count Ducel, of whom the Empress was a daughter, lived. They rarely visited the capital, so Aerys missed them. Since the banquet would last an entire month, it was an excellent opportunity to spend time with them. The large, loving Elmire family was the complete opposite of the closed and cruel Edenbell family, a completely indifferent mother and a father concerned only with the heir, Lachias, and of course the one worshipped by all, Marianne. From Alisa's thoughts, the little girl became upset, starting to cry quietly and frightening Aerys, who immediately rushed to her daughter and began to comfort her, trying to understand what was wrong. The tears in Aisha's eyes instantly began to disappear as soon as she saw her mother's caring, worried face expressing concern for the child. As soon as the Empress saw the girl's calmness, she immediately softened. Her parents reassured her that they would always be nearby and would not let anyone hurt her, especially on her own birthday. Aerys was touched when she noticed that her daughter had fallen asleep, and gently stroking her back, began to hum a lullaby next to her husband, putting her to bed and wishing the little one's sweet dreams. When night had filled the sky and covered the palace, Aisha opened her eyes and sat up in bed, glancing out the window. The little girl did not like the night. She hated the darkness, but the spirits of light, whom the princess decided to call, could help her at any moment. They always supported her in her new life, which Aisha greatly appreciated. Suddenly they began to circle rapidly around the girl, surprising and slightly frightening her. To her question about what was happening, no answer came. Only the tool began to move, as if from the wind, and the little lights flew to the open window. Suddenly, Aisha saw the spirits begin to illuminate a silhouette, starting from golden hair and ending with the entire figure. Before her stood a man with long hair and honey amber eyes, in rich clothing adorned with a dark green cloak. He held a couple of lights in his hand. He glanced at the little girl, who was looking at him in surprise, trying to mentally ask, like the spirits, who he was. In her head, the same familiar voice rang out, confirming her gift of seeing spirits. The statement caught the princess by surprise, raising many questions. How did he know? How did he get here? Should she cry out for someone? Was she in danger? What could a girl who had just turned one do against a stranger in her chambers? But as soon as he pressed a finger to his lips, asking for silence, Aisha calmed down and simply watched carefully. Quietly stepping on the carpet, the blonde approached her bed, examining the interesting child. Those lights that were always nearby turned into something resembling fairies and bowed, greeting the king. Aisha was struck. Indeed, he had spoken to her mentally without uttering a single sound. Observing the little one's confusion, the king of spirits realized he had rushed to come to her, so he slowly extended his hand and, touching her forehead with his finger, commanded her to fall into a deep sleep and forget what had happened. A light appeared at his fingertip before he removed it, and Aisha tried to resist the spell, but it was already too late. In the last moment, before falling into a deep sleep, she looked into the spirit's eyes. The little one sweetly fell asleep, losing all memories associated with him.